Hi, welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna, and I'm excited to be talking to you again so soon. Usually there's a week between episodes, but we're going to do a little what I thought would be mini-sode this week, but I opened up questions to you guys, and it seems like there's quite a few questions, so we'll see how many this episode actually is. We're diving into part 2 of digital gardening. If you haven't seen the digital gardening episode, go check that out. That has a lot of context that you might be confused if you jump in right here. But I wanted to revisit this topic because I've seen digital gardening referred to in ways that I don't consider to be digital gardening throughout the internet. It's interesting how words can change definition as they fly through the digital space, and that is totally fine, but I've seen it used to mean things like blogs and things like curation roundups of the things that you've consumed in a week. And to me, those things are not digital gardens. So I'm going to take today to talk about what is a digital garden and what isn't a digital garden, and why I feel like it's important to differentiate and be clear in the words that we're using. And then I'm going to dive into all of the sweet questions that y'all sent me over on my Instagram stories. If you're not following Wild Geese Pod on Instagram, that's where a lot of things like polls and questionnaires and whatever go out. So if you want to be able to vote in those polls and put your questions in for episodes like this, then go hop over to Wild Geese Pod on Instagram. Of course, I also look at the comments on Spotify and YouTube and all of that as well, but sometimes I have like specific topics that I want your thoughts on, so that happens over on Instagram. So we're all digital gardening in order to keep our minds sharp and involved in the conversation. So in the spirit of continued learning, I'm excited to chat about today's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant helps you get smarter every day with thousands of interactive lessons in math, science, programming, and data analysis. Listen, I'm an English and history girl through and through. I was the girl that was like at the kitchen table while my dad tried to tutor me on my math homework, crying my eyes out because I just didn't get it. But that's what really makes me excited about platforms like Brilliant. Brilliant's offering the most effective way to learn. Through hands-on games that build problem-solving skills, Brilliant's method is proven to be 6 times more effective than lecture videos. They have content crafted by an award-winning group of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, Microsoft, Google, you name it. You can even learn on the go with Brilliant's mobile app. If you want to learn how to be more creative on the internet, you can learn how to code through their Thinking in Code course. And if you're into science, you can learn anything from the mechanics of simple machines all the way to the physics of black holes. Click the link in my bio or scan this QR code to get the first 30 days of Brilliant for free and 20% off of an annual premium subscription. Anywhoomst, look what I got. Someone gave me flowers. Hooray! And when we opened up the little package that flowers come in, it had a jalapeno in it. So anyway, that's just me setting the scene for the digital gardening episode. This is our garden image, in case you forgot what a garden looks like. Anyway, so I've been wanting to do this episode for a while because I do periodically get people asking me to come back around to this topic, but also because I've been seeing people use digital gardening as a misnomer for other things. So I want to say at the outset, again, if you haven't seen the first video, go watch the first video about what digital gardening is. I give a whole definition of it. But the 2 main things that I'm seeing digital gardening get confused with are those like curation roundups of things that people have consumed throughout the week or month, and blogs. Like I watched a video of a girl straight up be like, a digital garden is a blog. And I was like, no, not a blog. A digital garden can be a tool that helps you create a blog, but I think that your digital garden should be a place where you can set aside the performance, you can set aside the perfectionism, and just have a space for yourself to cultivate your interests. Again, see the way the roots are connecting below ground. And it's really hard to do that when you're thinking about it as a final product, like a blog. And I think it's distinct from those curation roundups. I hope you know what I'm talking about, where it's just like a bunch of screenshots. A curation roundup is a package of the things that you have consumed. It's not you integrating your thoughts about the things that you've consumed. And don't get me wrong, there is value in curation. I mean, there's a reason why a museum curator is like, that's a whole career. And with how vast and oversaturated and noisy the internet is, I think that curating good content is a valuable thing to do. Speaking of, I would say one of the most frequently asked questions that I get is, who are my favorite Substackers? How do I find the sources that I'm looking for? And we'll get into sort of how I find those sources later on in the episode. But since we're talking about curation here, I just wanted to hop in here and say that I'm going to pop the link to join my newsletter in the episode description. Once a week, I'll be sending out a curated list of all of my favorite sources that I've come across in a week. This is different from my Substack because my Substack I'm using for personal narrative writing, and it's just generally going to change up what my newsletter is. My newsletter in the past has historically been about podcasting tips. I still will be sending out podcasting tips here and there, but I want to provide one spot that you know you can go to each week for quality sources to add to your digital garden. So go over to that link in my episode description to join my newsletter. Wink, wink. I can't wink. But still, it's packaging up basically a product and putting it out there, and it doesn't have anything to do with how that piece affected you. It doesn't help you integrate your thoughts on that piece. You're not seeing more of yourself through the thing that you just observed by just spitting out all of the things that you just observed and saying, look, these are the things I saw this week. A digital garden is for you. Like, I'm not talking about the garden that you put on your front lawn just to impress your neighbors. I'm talking about the garden that's in the back that you're experimenting with. You're seeing if you can actually keep those flowers alive. And I just think it's important to be clear in the words that we're using and distinguish between the two. Because if we don't, I think that we're sort of losing the entire point of digital gardening. And the entire point of digital gardening to me is making sure that you are giving yourself the tools to step out of the role of consumer and into the role of creator, ultimately. And I think if we're immediately jumping into performance mode by immediately making it into a blog and calling that a digital garden, we're skipping a bunch of steps. And if we're immediately regurgitating it as a media roundup, we're learning nothing about ourselves. So anyway, that's my rant. If you want the full definition and you're confused, again, go back to the first episode of the digital gardening, whatever. I lay it all out there. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this episode defining things because I spent a lot of time on the last episode doing that. I just wanted to make that distinction clear at the outset. But now let's go into the Q&A. So this episode is going to be a little bit different than any other episodes that I've done before because it's going to be more Q&A style than like, I don't know, video essay style. And who knows, maybe that actually won't change much about the structure. I don't know. We're just going to have to see how the cookie crumbles. So based on the questions that I've got, I've kind of broken this video up into 4 different sections. Number 1, we're going to talk about some different platforms that you can use for digital gardening. Number 2, we're going to talk about the actual process of taking these notes. Number 3, we're going to talk about how to find good, juicy sources that you actually want to take notes on. And number 4, I'm going to talk a little bit about my takeaways from my time digital gardening, because believe it or not, when I made that video a couple months ago about digital gardening, I had only been doing it for like a couple months at that point, if that. It might have been a couple weeks in, and I was just so excited about the process that I was like, I have to tell someone about this. But yeah, last time I talked about this, I was very new to it. Now I've got some reps under my belt, so we'll talk about that at the end. So, okay, number 1, the platform. Someone asked, I know you use Obsidian, but are there other alternatives / ways to cultivate a digital garden? And the answer is absolutely. So if you go back to my rabbit holes essay, you will see another platform that I've been using in conjunction with Obsidian for my digital garden. It's called Arena, and I'll have it linked below. That one I use as more of a source dump. So here's my situation in life right now. For a couple days a week, I have an office job that I do alongside running my podcast production business. And there is a lot of downtime at that office job, if I'm being so completely honest. But I am not on my laptop. And on my laptop, I have Obsidian as a desktop app. It's not really something that you can log into through the internet. Arena, on the other hand, I can. So I can read my Substacks, I can plop them into Arena, get them part of the digital garden, and then I can go back to them when I'm ready to actually take notes on them. Maybe don't tell my boss that. I think she'd be fine with it. She literally sits next to me as I'm reading Substacks. But anyway, I digress. I just know that Obsidian is not always accessible on every computer, and I don't love their mobile app, if I'm honest. I found that I don't love Arena as much for note-taking purposes. I like it as a source dump. I like it as an inspiration finder for things like images, a meme dump as well. I use it for that. But for the actual note-taking process, I do still like Obsidian. Someone else asked, did you set up your Obsidian app exactly like the video you referenced? And the answer is yes. When it comes to systems, especially computer systems, I want someone else to set that up for me. And then I can modify it to fit my needs, but I don't want to create my own system for myself. The way that Odysseys sets up his Obsidian and his tutorial worked for me. I understand that everybody's mind works very differently though. So there are other options. You can create a digital garden. Someone told me that you can actually literally do this in the Notes app on your phone. Like, it has similar abilities to link different notes to each other. I didn't know that. I don't have a tutorial for you on how to use that. I'm sure someone on YouTube does, but that's another option. Another thing that I've seen people use is Notion. And Lexi Merritt, actually, the woman that I was talking about a lot last week, the founder of the Pretty Decent Internet Cafe, she made an amazing Notion template called the Desktop Organizer, and she has a template within the desktop organizer called the Second Brain. And when you buy the desktop organizer, you actually get a whole tutorial on how to use the Second Brain template. So that's another thing. If you're a Notion person, that's a great option. I also recently learned about something called the Sublime app. They call it a knowledge tool that sparks creativity, and you can basically save anything that you see anywhere on the internet and make connections similar to the way that you can through Arena. So that's another option. There are so many options out there. There are so many systems to choose from. I know that the Obsidian setup can be a little bit confusing and take a bit of time. If it's overwhelming you so much that you feel you can't get started, scrap it and simplify. Just start taking notes. I think it's so easy to get so caught up in building the perfect system before we can start using the system. And the fact is, I set up my Obsidian the same way that Odyssey's set up his. And also, I'm not using it perfectly. Like, there are probably modifications that I could make to make more sense for me as an individual. But his setup is working for me right now, and I can assess over time if it's continuing to work for me or not. And that kind of naturally brings me into the questions about the process. One person asked, how do you keep track of your Obsidian notes? I tend to lose/forget notes. And the answer is, I lose/forget notes all the time, and that's okay. Some things are meant to be lost. I think of it like memory, right? Like, your brain cannot hold on to everything that happens. And yeah, sure, that's why we write, that's why we take notes, so that we can remember things that otherwise we wouldn't. But also, even in the notes, there's only so much you can hold, and you can't expect yourself to remember or hold on to every note that you ever take. There are going to be things that sort of get lost in the ether, and maybe you don't see that note for years and years to come, and you stumble upon it 4 years from now. That's okay. It's generally okay to lose track of some notes. It's okay to accidentally log things incorrectly and not know where they went. Something that you can do in order to help yourself find notes if you forget to tag things correctly or you put them in the wrong spot is to make sure that you're titling your notes in a way that is not trying to be clever. It's just trying to be clear, so that then if you lose a note, you can actually go back in and do a keyword search and say, like, okay, I think the title of that note that I wrote that I lost somewhere in this platform was called something like blah, blah, blah. And then you can type that into the search bar and see if it comes up. But this is also why we like to tag our notes, so that you can go to a tag. So say I have like an intersectional feminism tag. I can click into that tab and it'll show me all the notes that I've ever taken that have to do with intersectional feminism. Then if I know that I want to work on a project that has something to do with intersectional feminism, I can take an afternoon and I can look through all of my notes in one sitting instead of trying to search through the entire platform. The next question is, how did you get into the habit/discipline of actually taking notes? And I'm going to loop this together with another question that says, how do you make taking notes on things in your everyday life enjoyable? And I think this really comes down to the fact that I'm kind of only taking notes on things that are enjoyable to me in some way. When I filmed the first digital gardening episode, I was kind of looking at it as a blanket thing to do with everything that I was consuming. But I found with time that the process that really works for me is consuming something in full first and then going back and taking notes if it's something that I felt snagged my attention in some way. The same doesn't apply for books, but I'll get to that in a second. When it comes to essays, movies, TV shows, I want to give myself the first moment to just experience it as it is. Because how I was doing it at the very beginning, where I was trying to do it with everything that I consumed, I would like start a note on something before I even knew if there was going to be like anything that I wanted to dig my teeth into further. So like I was getting really frustrated because I would start taking notes on an essay and then get halfway through the essay and be like, there is nothing of substance here for me to take a note on. And I'm not even just saying this in like, I only take notes on the things that I really enjoy. I also take notes on things that I really don't enjoy if I find it interesting that I really didn't enjoy it. Like, you know, sometimes you'll see a movie that everybody was hyped up about and you're like, that movie was kind of terrible. Okay, that's kind of interesting. That's the critic in you. Like, why am I actually feeling that way? Do I want to dig into that feeling further? Do I want to look at the context around the piece? Like, does that feel interesting to me? So I guess I want to kind of amend what I was saying before about like only taking notes on things that are enjoyable to me. That's not what it is. I'm only taking notes on things that are interesting to me. And they can be interesting in the way that I hate them, just as they can be interesting in the way that I love them. But sometimes some of the stuff that you consume is just not interesting. So taking notes on things that are not interesting to you is going to feel like a drag. So don't make yourself do that. Another reason why I love doing it this way is that it does kind of force you to slow down and come back around to those things that were interesting to you. Like I think about music will play on repeat for like months and months and months while we enjoy it, but we don't typically do the same for the things that we're reading or the things that we're watching. And the reason why I don't wait until I've completely read a book to take notes on it is that I think that specifically with the medium of books, because they're so long form, it is really beneficial to take notes, whether it's in your digital garden or just in the margins, like annotate your books as you're reading them first time around or not. But I read a quote recently, I wonder if I'm going to be able to find it, about the process of rereading books, about how it feels like every time that you reread a book, you're actually reading a completely different book because you're a different person the second time around or the third time around. You're going to be picking up on new things. And I feel the same way about watching a TV show the second time around. Ayan Artin has a Substack called How to Be a Critic, and I think she has some really useful tips, whether you want to be like a culture critic or not. And one of the tips she gives is, taste it again. Some work will elicit an immediate reaction from you. That reaction will not always be critically accurate or fair. Food critics will often visit a restaurant thrice before they make their judgment. I function the same way now. I'll do an honest first watch or read, notebook and pen on the other side of the room, where I let the story swallow me up. The second visit is technically my first critical watch or listen. This time, I note everything down. When a little time has passed, I revisit the work and see if my observations still ring true. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to alter a draft after a rewatch. Sometimes all it takes is a second try when you aren't distracted by your phone or in a foul mood post-workout. Ask questions of the work. Tilt it around and see if you spot the same blemishes. If you do, put it in the piece. It stuck out for a reason. If you've been trying to get into the habit of digital gardening, but it's just not working for you, I honestly recommend revisiting something from the past that you know that you were obsessed with. So like on the last digital gardening episode, I shared some of my notes on Fleabag. I had watched Fleabag back in 2019, and I decided to revisit it when I started digital gardening because I knew that it would be a very ripe place to take notes. And don't worry about making this like a huge intellectual exercise. I think that's another part of making this a habit and making this enjoyable to yourself, is getting rid of that professor in your head that's telling you that your notes need to be perfect and academic and yada yada. Your notes can sound like you're texting your best friend. I don't really care. Like a few weeks ago, I was feeling tired and lazy, and I was like, I'm just going to pop this on. I'll add it to my digital garden because I know that I liked the first season, so it'll probably have a lot of things that I want to take notes on. And then the source material notes, the notes that you're just taking as you're consuming the thing to like enhance your understanding of the material, whatever, they were completely unacademic. I did not make this clear, but during this part, I'm talking about the notes that I took on the rehearsal with Nathan Fielder. If you haven't seen the rehearsal with Nathan Fielder, I don't think that I say anything that's like a huge spoiler or anything like that. Like for this note, the one question that I had was, are pilots scumbags? LMAO. So I don't know. I just wanted to showcase that because I feel like in the first digital gardening episode, the notes that I shared were very well developed, you know, and sometimes you're going to sit down and do source material notes and you're going to have like full thoughts about things and you're going to be kind of blowing your own mind about the thoughts that you're having. And then sometimes it's going to be late at night. You're going to be tired after a long day of work. And the only thing that you can think to write down in your digital garden is, LOL, this part was crazy. And you know what? That's enough. The next question says, how much time do you spend with your garden day to day? What is needed from you as a thought gardener from week to week and month to month? Okay, so I have not made this a day-to-day obligation for myself. I do it a couple of times a week. I would say I add things to my source dump most days, but as far as the actual note-taking process goes, that has not become an everyday habit for me. I know for some people, some writers especially, building up an everyday habit is really important. So I think that the second part of this question of like, what is needed from you as a thought gardener week to week and month to month, that's going to vary greatly depending on who you are and what you want to gain from your digital garden. If you're really serious about like becoming a writer, then you might want to make this an everyday habit. For me, I think I've been able to keep the weight of obligation off of digital gardening by letting it be something that I do a couple of times a week as honestly a way to like unwind and have more of a conversation with myself. I find it to be really fun. But I know that some people, like for example, Odysseys, have talked about doing a little mini essay once a day. So the mini essays are what you would put in your main notes versus your source notes, which is what I sort of just read to you from the rehearsal. Your source notes are like just casual notes as you're consuming a thing or as you're consuming a thing for the second time, versus the main notes are your thoughts on the thing. Some people like to make it a habit of doing one little mini essay in their main notes every single day. I have not gotten to the point where I'm doing that every single day, but when I am taking notes, I do try to make a point of doing at least one little mini essay in the main notes after or during my process of taking the source notes. So the next question, is there a specific way you take notes? It feels like I'm just dumping it all with no real care. I feel like I sort of touched on this a bit in the first digital gardening episode, but I can expand on it here. So like I was saying before with the rehearsal notes, those are notes that I'm taking as I'm consuming something, usually for the second or third time. They can be as casual or formal and academic as you want them to be, but please try your best to get the little professor that's like waiting to give you an A out of your head and just take notes that are really for you and your thoughts. What I've started to do with the source material notes is break it up into 3 different sections. Number 1 is themes, number 2 is highlights and observations, and number 3 are questions that are coming up. I like to think about the themes that are being explored because that's just interesting to me from a creative process perspective. In a matter of words, you can start to think to yourself, okay, it seems like this artist is thinking about this theme in this way. What do I think about this theme? So going back to the rehearsal example, one of the themes is obviously a need for control. Sorry if you haven't seen the rehearsal and this is not obvious to you. This is just the example I'm working with today. But when I become conscious of the fact that control is a theme that we're working around, then I can start to think in the direction of like, okay, this artist is thinking about control in this way. How am I thinking about control in my life right now? And how might that translate into my work? And then the second section, highlights and observation, that's where I would pop things like quotes that are interesting to me, parts that are really funny in a TV show, parts that are really sad, anything that sticks out. Write about those things. In the source material notes, this can be one sentence or it can be a whole paragraph. It doesn't really matter. If you find that you're writing about one thing a lot in the source material notes though, that's a good clue that you might want to take it into your main notes, which I'll get to in a second. But then the final section is questions. And these are questions that I don't care if I think the answer is going to come up in 2 seconds or I think that it's like an obvious question. I'm going to write it as soon as the question enters my head. Learning to clock your questions and take note of them and take them seriously is what helps you start to clock and track your own curiosity. And all of these things are clues. One of the questions that I got was, how do you take your rough notes on something and then turn them into completely new ideas? And I think what's beautiful about this process is that you don't have to make a completely new idea. Your idea is going to be influenced by other ideas. That's the whole point of digital gardening. But how you're going to go from taking notes on somebody else's work into creating your own work is by training your attention to spot the snags of curiosity and then leaning into that. So that's where the main notes come in. So you've now taken all of these notes on the source material. Say again, we're talking about the rehearsal. I have all of those notes on the source material for the rehearsal. They can be the silliest notes ever, but I might be clued into the fact that something is interesting to me if I wrote 5 lines about it versus 2 words. I might be clued into my curiosity about something because one of the questions that I wrote down is still stirring in my head and I actually want an answer to it. So then you go over to the main notes and you write a little mini essay. And by mini essay, I mean a couple paragraphs, like 2-3 paragraphs max with your thoughts. So I'll take you through a couple different things that I could pull from the source material notes and create my own little mini essay for the main notes with. So under themes, the first thing that I have under themes is what it means to see yourself as a co-pilot in life. So I could then go and write a whole mini essay about how maybe in past romantic relationships, I've felt like I've taken on the role of co-pilot, or I've seen my friends or family take on the role of co-pilot and how that's actually taken away some of their agency in life. Okay. That could be one mini essay all by itself just because I made one note about this being a theme in an episode of The Rehearsal with Nathan Fielder. Okay. Under questions, one of the questions that I have is I need to hear about the behind the scenes of the show from an actor's perspective. Like how many of these interactions are real and how many of these people are paid actors versus real people. I could then go to my main notes and write a little mini essay about the blurred lines between reality and fiction that actors are asked to walk. And maybe, I don't know, the psychological implications of that. Or I could even just write a note about how badly I want the answer to this question. And then for the highlights and observation sections for one of the episodes, I said, I feel like it's so offensive to tell someone they don't have a good aura. Like, damn, that would fuck with me. Okay, so then in my main notes, maybe I write a mini essay about how desperate I am for people to think that I have a good aura. And these little mini essays that you're writing are not only valuable for writers. I think that there can be a misconception that this is only a valuable process for other writers. But the thing is, writing is thinking. This is not just about having a bunch of little mini essays that you can one day like put together and make a blog. Like, this is really helpful for writers, don't get me wrong, but this is not only for writers. This is so that you can always go back in and observe your thought process with the next project. This is so that you can become more attuned to your own obsessions, to where your mind goes, to develop your taste. And those things are your guide towards the thing that you're going to make, whether that thing is a painting or a book. And we might think like the process for a painting and a book is so different. But someone left a comment on the last digital gardening episode that I thought was so good. I want to read it to you. They said, one of my art professors talks about this. He basically urged us to document things, images that captivated us, cracks on the sidewalk, pieces of trash that you find in cities across the world, art gallery visits, your favorite colors, what you ate, textures of the city, etc. He says, whatever draws your eye is sort of like your subconscious mind making inquiries and connections between those things. He talked about this curating curiosities, and it really stuck with me. He said, instead of using Pinterest for inspo, use the world around you. He said, each of us is a walking curatorial board, and the concept of digital gardening reminds me of that. All of this is about following your curiosities. Some people are more inspired by words. Some people are more inspired by images. Some people are more inspired by sounds. All of these things will become clear to you, but I think digital gardening, whether you're a writer or any other kind of artist, is helpful in the creative process because writing is thinking, and you need to be thinking about what you're seeing in order to create something quote unquote new. But for this question, how do I turn notes/ideas into practice? Usually there's no outcome. I just keep researching. This is going to widely vary based on what you're creating. But if you're creating a piece of writing, then you've honestly done the bulk of the work just by writing notes. Creating a larger piece just ends up coming from connecting a bunch of notes together and bridging the gaps between those connections. So say I watched Fleabag, I made a bunch of source notes about them, and then I brought them into the main notes, and a lot of the main notes had the tag desire. Okay, then I can click into that tag and I can see all of the other things that I've written about desire. I can click into those other notes about desire that had inspiration drawn from different sources, and I can see if they can be in conversation. That's one way of many, many ways that your digital garden can help you make unexpected connections. So suddenly you're able to connect an episode of Fleabag to an Audre Lorde essay that you read a year ago, or a video essay about, I don't know, the French Revolution that you watched last month. Or sometimes the quote unquote new thing comes about in much simpler ways. It's just a byproduct of paying more attention, slowing down, and coming back around to things you enjoy instead of bulldozing through to find more sources and more sources. Like, I understand the impulse to read as many books as you can in a year and watch as many TV shows and stay up to date because there's so much going on, but you will get so much more out of things if you actually just consume slowly. Like, for example, earlier today I was on the subway, I was listening to a song called Look Mom, I Made It by Anika Kilkenny, and one of the things that made me add this song to my playlist was a line in it that says, "You don't understand the depth of the strength found within my mental or the violence it took to become this gentle." When I heard the violence it took to become this gentle, I was like, oh, chills down my spine, adding this to my playlist. And then I was listening to it on the train and I was like, I wonder if this was inspired by something else because it sounds like a piece of poetry or something. So I Googled it, and the quote, "The violence it took to become this gentle," is attributed to like multiple people. It seems like the internet can't make up its mind. It's either Ralph Waldo Emerson or someone named Nitya Prakash. But like, I'm sure that that line got woven into this person's song because they read it or heard it somewhere and then came back around to it. It's stuck in their head. And when we're going through content so fast, nothing has time to stick in our head. Okay, so the next question is, can I connect different sources to each other directly, or will that make it too chaotic? For example, if a source I'm taking notes on mentions another source that I also want to take notes on, should I create a note for it inside the other one, kind of like Wikipedia? Yeah. Totally. I don't think that that would make it too chaotic. But like I was saying earlier, use the system for a while and then modify it to fit your needs. Too chaotic to me is going to mean something very different than what it's going to mean to you. It's just like walking into someone's room. Like, some people are very messy, but they know where everything is and it's totally fine. And some people want everything in its rightful place. If linking source material together like a Wikipedia page works for you, do it. The only way that I really link things right now is through tags, and that works for my little thematic brain. But if you want to make it more Wikipedia-esque, you should. Okay, so now on to the section about finding sources that you would be excited to add to your digital garden. This is sort of a bigger question of like, hey, how do you wade through the internet, which is filled with so much content, to find content that is actually exciting to you? And the truth is, when it comes to reading and Substack in particular, it's just a lot of time spent reading and knowing intuitively when to give up on a piece of writing that's not for you. But also start to pay attention to the creators, the writers that you do enjoy, and what they're recommending. Because if you like their writing, then what they're recommending is what they're reading, and what they're reading is influencing their writing. So that's usually been a pretty surefire way for me to find writing that's exciting to me. As far as movies, TV shows, even YouTube videos, I have built up a community of people in my life that usually recommend really good stuff, and I can trust their recommendations. So that really helps. Shout out to all of my friends that absolutely insisted that I watch Succession a couple of years ago, and now they're doing the same thing with Severance, and I haven't quite gotten on it yet, but I will. But again, I think the best place to start for finding things that are juicy enough to put in your digital garden are things that have already excited you in the past, and revisiting those things. What I found is that process of revisiting helps you go deeper with that thing and can lead you naturally to more sources. So if I start with revisiting Fleabag, what might naturally happen next is that I get kind of obsessed with the style, and I'm like, what else has Phoebe Waller-Bridge done? Let's go check out her other shows. And then I'm naturally being guided down this path of curiosity that's not being fed to me by an algorithm. Someone asked what my first note in the digital garden was and what the most recent note in the digital garden was. And the first note that I took was a source material note on Odyssey's video on how to create the system in Obsidian. And then the most recent notes I'm actually still in the middle of taking are about an essay called Erotic Decisions by Muse Guided on Substack. You should go check it out. It is so juicy. My notes are robust on that. And then someone asked, have you seen your writing or thought process change as you've progressed as a gardener? And the answer is absolutely 100%. I have never felt more curious and creatively guided in my entire life. I think that there's a certain kind of pain that comes with being a creative person and feeling lost in that, not knowing which direction to take, not knowing what to make. These things really eat at you when you have a lot of creative energy and you just don't know where to put it. And digital gardening has provided a real sense of guidance that is coming from nowhere but myself. And that feels really good. And I think I need to leave it there. I'm so sorry. I don't think that I got to all of your questions, but this is already a 30-minute episode. So if the questions keep coming, maybe we come back around to this at some point. But I hope this helped you get started with digital gardening, or pick it back up if you started and stopped. Whether you make something from it or not, it's such a lovely process to get to know yourself better and pull you out of that doom scroll. But I have to say, I've been really, really touched by the amount of people that have reached out to me and told me about the things that they have created and told me that digital gardening helped them create it. I've heard from people that have started Substacks, that started podcasts. One person even emailed me and said that they were inspired to write a movie, and they sent me the whole deck for it. They already have producers in place. This is going to be a real thing that they bring into the world. It's so, so cool to see. Please keep sending them. If something in your digital garden sparks you in a way where you put something out into the world, I want to see it. And I will talk to you in 2 weeks.